Here we go. All right, let's go ahead and begin our class today. We are getting near the end of our class. We're moving near the end. So we've been studying the topic of biblical foundations, seeking to get a good biblical understanding of the whole Bible, which begins with a study and foundation, establishment of Genesis 1 through 11, because Genesis 1 through 11 affects all the rest of Scripture, not just in its content, but even in our approach to it. And so let's begin with the word of prayer, and then we'll get right into this class. The goal is today, by the way, to cover through chapter 10, Genesis 10. So we'll cover 9 and 10 today is the plan. And we should have some time. We should have some time at the end for some questions, especially over the first 10 chapters. And then I'll explain more after that time. But near the end of the class, we'll talk about the rest of the course. We are almost done. Just maybe about 2 more classes, we will be done. So Lord, bless our time together. Thank you for your precious word that you have given to us by inspiration of your Spirit. May we see its profitability. May we see the foundation it lays for our ministries, for our lives, and for our preaching. And may you continue to bless these men in their studies. Help them, Lord, to endure. Help them to push through. Help them to finish strong, not just for the sake of this course and for a grade, but Lord, to finish strong because this is so foundational for their whole life and ministry. Bless and use me as your messenger today as I teach your word, and may be a profitable time for us all. We pray in Christ's name, amen. All right, I'm not going to go through a whole review. I did that last time, and so we're just going to quickly go through these slides and catch up to where we're supposed to be. And then probably our next class, I will do a little longer review in preparation for our final exam, which will be 2 classes from now. So we went through the creation week, chapter 1. And so any questions you have, you can ask me these at the end of the class today. It's a plan. And we'll probably have time our next class also to have some questions. So feel free to write some down as you are working. We went to chapters 1 and 2, saw the overview of the creation. And then chapter 2 saw really an explanation and elaboration of chapter 2. I mean, it's going to be day 6 in chapter 2. Then we saw the unfortunate fall of mankind as man and Eve and Adam were tempted and gave in to sin. And then the results that came from that, results that we still feel today personally, as well as in our world. Then in chapter 4, we began seeing the beginning of life as Cain and Abel were born. And then sadly, the rebellion of Cain against God, and how Cain was marked, but how Cain represents the common man and his and desire to do things on his own terms. That's modern man, making up religion of our own and so forth. And that's Cain, and that's us before we're saved. Then we saw the line of Seth and the promises there. What a blessing that was. And then with the walking with God theme and examples of Enoch and Noah. Of course, God used Noah to as an instrument to save the world from total destruction, total life being destroyed. And so life, human life, animal life was preserved on the ark. All that were on the ark were protected. Talked about the ark, descriptions of it. That's not just a story or a myth or an analogy, but actually a true event. We talked about how God gave instructions, and Noah's emphasis here was his obedience. What a great example he is of obedience, even when we don't understand what's going on. And then the flood ended. God showed his protection and mercy on Noah. Flood ended, and they were able to come out of the ark and obey the Lord even there, and be relieved of some concerns and offer the sacrifice to God from the clean animals that were there. Whoops, I guess I need to go back to that. And that brings us up really to what your homework was for today, which was to continue to read through Genesis 9 through 11 and just become more and more familiar with this passage, and lesser familiar passages of this portion because it's later on. So you read that, and then today your assignment was to submit your next sermon on one of the phrases that you find in Genesis 6 through 8. You had a choice as to which phrase. It was a textual sermon, which one to choose. One that deals with topics such as every imagination of thoughts, dealing with depravity, dealing with sinful inclinations. Develop that sermon, turn it into trainingdiscipleship@gmail.com, or the Walking with God theme that we find throughout Scripture, beginning with Enoch and then Noah, and then we have the privilege as Christians in the New Testament to walk with God. Trace that, or the emphasis thirdly on this third point of Noah's obedience and how he's an example to all Christians. Whatever you decide to do, if you have not yet turned that in, it needs to be turned in today to trainingdiscipleships@gmail.com. So I've said enough about that. So let's go ahead and move on to today's lessons. And we're going back up to chapter 9, verse 1. We kind of went through that kind of quickly at the end, but we're not going to spend as much time. You should have seen this last week, but I will do a little more explanation of Genesis 9, and because it really builds into this important theme of the image of God theme. So Genesis chapter 9, we'll begin there and begin with verse 1. And this should be in your notes already, but in case you missed any of this, it's right here. And God blessed Noah and his sons and said unto them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. Very similar command that God gave to Adam and Eve back in Genesis chapter 1. So just a need for them to once again replenish the earth because there were only 8 people alive: Noah and his wife, Noah's 3 sons and their wives, and that was it. No babies, no children, no young people other than Noah's sons, who were at that time about 100 years of age. And so they were told to go ahead and begin to reproduce, not to wait, as long as we saw, for instance, in chapter 5, how people were not having their first child until they were in their hundreds and a couple hundred years old. Now time was going to be more limited. People would not live as long, as we will see, because of the effects of the new climate after the flood. So, but first of all, the command is that they be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. That's still a command for today. And of course, people are doing that pretty well, as we now have the largest population in world history, as far as we know, living in the earth today. Now, it is possible, some have speculated that before the flood, billions of people could have lived. We don't know. We do know there's lots of fossils from animals and people, but most of that's been now, after all these years, after all these thousands of years, have now been pressured down to coal fields and fossil beds, and combined with other carbon and made into carbon. So anyway, but there's speculation, perhaps people had lived for hundreds of years, had dozens and dozens of children. There could have truly have been, there definitely were millions of people, and it could even be billions of people who lived before the flood. We don't know. All we know is after the flood, 8 people. And these 8 people were commanded to begin to reproduce. Then verse 2, the little reminder, and this, by the way, what we're seeing here in chapter 9, the establishment of the Noahic covenant, this covenant of common grace. We'll talk about that more in a few minutes as we get a little further down the chapter. And the reason why it's a covenant of common grace, because it makes promises to all humans and creatures that have lifeblood. So it didn't mean, it's not just a promise to Christians, it's not just a promise to different group, Jewish people or whatever else. It's actually a promise, a covenant with all people, that God would not destroy the world again with a flood, with water, and of course to all animals. And it is an unconditional promise or unconditional covenant, once again, too, not based on man's obedience, as some of the covenants were based. Some of the covenants are conditional covenants. This was an unconditional covenant. a covenant for all people, whether the people call themselves atheists or Christians or Hindus or Buddhists or Muslims. This is a covenant for all people, that God would not destroy the whole world again and life again with a worldwide flood. And of course, he has not, and he will not. Future judgment, of course, is going to be a judgment by fire, and that's yet to come. That has not happened yet. Then verse 2, related to this new relationships, this covenant and so forth, there'll be a new relationship between humans and animals. You know, before they would come to Adam, Adam named them. Before they came to Noah, at least 2 of every type and 7 of the clean animals, and they came into the ark. Now animals would have a fear of mankind, of humans, all but the domesticated animals like the cattle and the pigs and the dogs, perhaps. The rest of them, those are dependent upon man. The rest of them would have a fear, a natural fear of man. The beasts, and which is the wild animals, the fowls, the creeping things, even the fish, showing fear and dread. I mean, fish don't jump into our boats for us to eat them. We have to go out and entice them with nets or with hooks. But anyway, the fear of you, verse 2 says, and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth, to the living wild animals, upon every fowl of the air, the birds, and upon all that moveth upon the earth, and upon all the fish of the sea. Into your hand are they delivered. Why? Because now they're going to become food for us. Whereas from the creation week, originally we were all vegetarians. The climate has changed. The relationship has changed. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. Every moving thing that liveth shall be meat or food for you, even as the green herb have I given you all things. So God before gave me as vegetarians. Now he has given us all food as meat. But flesh with the blood thereof, which is the blood, flesh with the like thereof, which is the blood thereof, shall you not eat. And so here the beasts, animals would be afraid of us, fearful of us. Mankind is now authorized to eat meat. We talked about this last time, so we're not going to go into this again. Why? Need for animal protein, perhaps? We don't know for sure. God doesn't tell us, perhaps. We know from science that we need a certain amount of animal protein, or we need to find some supplement for that, as many Indians have done because of vegetarian diet still. But we are allowed to eat meat under God's economy, where they show a great gulf between man and animals. Now they hunt each other. Wild animals hunt people sometimes. They're seen as food. Of course, people see animals as food. And also to prevent the extermination of human race, because remember, coming off the ark, there were only 8 people, but there were like 2 lions and 2 tigers. There were 2 of each of the dinosaurs. There were 2 of other animals that would be hunting. And so there was a need for man to be able to defend himself. And one way he might be doing that is hunting the animals. Okay, we talked about this last week, so we're moving through this quickly. And then we moved into the command that we were not to eat the meat, though we could eat the meat. We're not to eat the meat with the blood still in it. We were not to eat the meat raw. We were to cook the meat. So he mentions that in verse 4, the special sacredness of human and even animal blood, of all blood. That's why it's to be cooked. But then human blood is even more special in this aspect. Blood, let's talk about blood. I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Blood is very important, because without the shedding of blood, there's no remission of sins. I didn't put that in there, but that's Hebrews 10:22, I believe. Old Testament teaches the importance of blood. New Testament does as well. New Testament also teaches that we all have the same human blood, but blood is very important. We'll get to that in chapter 11, by the way. Blood is very important in God's economy. So repeated there in Acts 15, the Christians, as people become believers, they were once again reminded not to eat the blood, not to drink the blood, but to cook the food so it's not bloody. It's not to be rare or raw, I should say, or drink the blood as the pagans often did, the Gentiles often did in New Testament times, but they were to cook the food. So blood was reserved for atonement, First Peter 1:19 talks about the precious blood of Christ. Blood in those who have life consciousness is important to understand. It's sacred. Blood is sacred. In God's way of looking, blood is sacred. Shedding of blood represents the forgiveness of sins. Of course, Jesus' blood was shed for us. The Son of God shed his blood for our redemption. And blood was misused in pagan practice and demon worship then and now, still is as well. So God put a sacredness and the sanctity of life, and especially represented by the blood, because the blood is life. The blood's not pumping, the person is not alive. The person doesn't have blood in his body, he is not alive. If we lose too much blood just from a bleed, we can die. There's an old Chinese proverb that talks about death by 1,000 cuts. They even have to be a mortal wound, just 1,000 cuts where you're bleeding. Eventually you lose your life because you lose so much blood. Okay, you guys go on. Then God puts a special understanding of blood, especially human blood, because why? Because we are made in the image of God. Animal blood's important also. That's why it's to be cooked. That's why food is to be cooked and not to drink the blood. But human blood is even that much more special because of the fact that we are made in the image of God. So verse 5 says, surely your blood of your lives will I require. At the hand of every beast will I require it, and at the hand of every man. So he says, even if an animal kills you, that's a very serious thing. And that was a reference here to Exodus 21, verse 28. The animal kills a person, kills a human. The animal kills a human. That animal is to be put to death. Exodus 21, 28 refers to that. And if an animal has killed a human in the past, was not put to death, and or was known to be aggressive in that way, and very much a danger, and the owner knows that, but still lets the animal roam freely and then kills someone else, the owner also, the human owner, could also suffer death because he allowed this wild animal or this aggressive animal to be around other people. That's Exodus 21. You can read that if you like. And so God's verse 5 is saying about the importance of value of human life. If an animal takes human life, there's a penalty. And if a human takes human life, there's a penalty. At the end of verse 5, at the hand of every man's brother will I require the life of man. So that was involved. We saw set up in the Old Testament law, which was not given at this point, obviously, but this idea of the Redeemer, an idea of the cities of refuge, the idea of a certain idea of certain revenge, killing or family killing. If someone murders a relative of yours, or there's certain responsibility of the family to do that. That was regulated under the law because people were doing that. So God therefore was already, and some of that was already going on. I'm sure even before the flood. I'm sure before the flood, there was a lot of revenge killing. Every man did that which was right in his own eyes. And the thoughts of his heart were always evil continually. And we understand that if someone were to do something evil and murder one of our own family members, especially one of our own children, my first impulse, which is a godly impulse, my first impulse would be to make that person pay if they were to harm and murder one of my own children. I think we all feel like that as parents, and especially as dads. But God said that's not necessarily the biblical impulse. In fact, it is actually the responsibility, verse 6, of human government. So it's not revenge killing, but it's just a meting out of punishment. If certain crimes are done, then there's a punishment that's due that. And so human punishment, human government is established in verse 6 instead of just revenge killing, which can be very dangerous. It goes back and forth, one side of the family, one family to the next family, and so forth, back and back for generations. Verse 6 says, whoso sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed. Okay, and that aspect there is not simply by a human or by a family member, but actually the idea of by mankind, by humankind, that man's blood shall be shed. The establishment of human government. And then he gives us the reason why, for in the image of God made he man. So the image of God theme comes back again, a theme which you will be developing for your final sermon that I'll be assigned to you tonight at the end of this class, at the end of this class. So the institution of human government we see here, we saw the need of it before the flood, back during the time of Cain, during the time of Lamech, that's chapters 4 of Genesis. We saw before the flood, just years before the flood, as every man did evil, and so this institution was there. And then we see the authorization here actually of capital punishment. I think this is where we ended last week. The responsibility is that of government. Romans 13 establishes it is a requirement. Acts 25, Paul said, if I am guilty of any kind of crime like that, I'm guilty of death. Of course, he knew he wasn't, but he was agreeing that he's under the laws of man. And then thirdly, the reason is because of the sanctity of human life. We are made, and every human is made, and so that really throws a problem into the whole caste system also in your country. But every human is made in the image of God, but yet there's still a just and legal penalty for murder of any human, even by an animal. And it's a deterrent. It makes someone think twice before they kill someone, they take someone else's life, because there is a deterrent to that. They could, and if they murder someone, they will likely lose their own life. That causes someone to think. That deters someone from doing their natural impulses, revenge killing, or wanting to take from someone else and devaluing human life. God puts a value in human life because we're made in His image. There's that theme, like I said, coming up again. Then we talk about the weak arguments, which I'm not going to go through all this in details again, but these are arguments used against capital punishment especially by Christians, and especially, I would say more so by Catholics and people who don't understand the scripture, liberal Christians. Thou shalt not kill should be actually literally translated, thou shalt not commit murder. Pro-life proponents say it's 2 murders. First, the initial murder that was done against the innocent party, and then government murder someone. No, it's not 2 murders. It's the forfeiture of life, of your own life, if you choose to murder someone else. And then the rashness of it, and oftentimes it's not very rash. In fact, unfortunately, in our country, someone could be sentenced to death and spend 20 or 30 years in jail working through the court system. To me, that is cruel and unusual punishment. Every day waking up under the death penalty, and I know today would be the day you die. So it could go on for a long time, but it's not rash. It's not too drastic. And we talked about this last week, so let's move on. So today, then we're going to pick up right here. Here's our new material, chapter 9, verse 7. Chapter 9, verse 1 kind of says the same thing, but here, chapter 9, verse 7 repeats it again. He says, and you be ye fruitful and multiply, and bring forth abundantly in the earth, and multiply therein. And so here we have the command repeated from verse 1, repeated also from chapter 1, but here particularly repeated to Noah and his family, his sons and their wives, to repopulate the world. Only 8 people were alive. And God used a very unusual Hebrew word here, bring forth in swarms. So just reproduce. Only 8 humans, so reproduce. Of course, the animals did the same thing naturally. They reproduce. The animals still do that today. They reproduce naturally. But humans were commanded here to reproduce as well. And so here's the command in this post-diluvian flood. Remember the idea of diluvian is flood, but this post-diluvian world in which we live, this post-flood world, only 8 humans, they were to reproduce. Now, what would cause God? Well, God commanded that, first of all, but what would cause them to pause? Well, once again, they saw what happened. They had family members and friends of theirs who had died just a year earlier in the flood. And I can imagine the heartache to be inside the ark as Noah and his wife and his 3 sons and their wives were, and they're here, people banging on the outside of the ark, perhaps saying, "Let us in, Noah, let us in," and hear maybe family members' voices calling for them to please let them in. And so I would be hesitant to have children and possibly another flood and possibly another ark, or going back in the same ark and realizing that my children would drown out there because they rejected God in their foolishness and their sinfulness, and hear them banging on the ark with all their might or whatever they were doing. That'd be scary. That'd be something I would want to avoid. But God says, no, bring forth, reproduce, repopulate this world, and then to allay their fears. He says, I'm not going to destroy the world again with a worldwide flood. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to judge man for he said it that way. And so he commanded them to do that, and then he gives the Noahic, he reminds us of what we call now today the Noahic covenant, this unconditional covenant that we'll talk about in just a minute. Chapter 9, verses 8 through 10 says this, and God spake unto Noah and to his sons with him, saying, behold, or say, God, this is God saying this, and behold, so God has emphasized, he's the one that's doing this. He's the one that's establishing this. He's the one that's making this promise. Verse 9, and behold, I establish my covenant with you and with your seed, your descendants after you, verse 10, and with every living creature that is with you, of the fowl and of the cattle, the domesticated animals, and of every beast of the wild animals of the earth with you, from all of that go out of the ark into every beast of the earth. So he's, first of all, to begin with, he's saying, I'm establishing this covenant, and this covenant, this promise, is not just with you, Noah, and your family, but actually it's going to be with all the animals that are living. All these animals, I'm making this promise to them as well. As we go on through verses 11 through 13, we find out that God's making this promise with Noah and the animals that's unconditional. I alluded to this earlier. So it's unconditional. It's not going to be conditioned on their obedience or their accepting the Lord God as their God, which of course we know they rejected him in just the very near future. Within about 100 years, they did that again at the Tower of Babel. But it's unconditional and it's also perpetual. That means it continues till today. It continues on as long as this world is. And this perpetual promise that was made to Noah and his family and to the animals is passed down still to us today. And what is that? Verses 11 through 13, that God will not again destroy all life with a flood. Let's read verses 11 through 13. And I will establish my covenant, my promise with you. Neither shall all flesh, here it is, neither shall all flesh be cut off anymore by the waters of a flood. Once again, the Hebrew word, mabal, that we looked at a couple weeks ago. The idea of this worldwide flood, this huge deluge, this total catastrophic destruction. He said, I will not do that again. This is not a promise of no local floods. Okay, this is not a promise of no local floods, because your country just had some local floods just as recently as last week when we were teaching this class over on the east side of your country. Lots of local floods and people lost their lives and many people lost their homes. Saw some of that even on the news myself. So it's not a promise against local floods, but against a worldwide flood that would destroy all life. One that you would not be able to escape. One that you would not be able to go in the mountains or go up to higher ground to escape. This is like Noah's flood was. This is the promise: no more universal, worldwide, world-destroying flood would take place. The Mabal, as I have written down there. So let's continue reading. So he says, I'm not going to do that again. Neither shall there be a flood to destroy the earth. Verse 11 continues. Verse 12. And God said, this is a token of the covenant or promise which I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you. Once again, it's for perpetual generation. So it continues on even to us today. I do, verse 13, I do set my, this is God's bow. God's made this. God's the one that establishes. I will set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be a token or a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. Okay, we of course call that today a rainbow that we see show up often after a rainstorm. And what it is, of course, we know scientifically what it is. The rainbow is a scientific scientific phenomena of when there's water crystals in our clouds. That's where our clouds primarily are. It's water, vapor, water crystals, vapor. As it gets heavier, it begins to form into liquid and falls to our earth in what we call rain or snow or sleet or ice or whatever. But those clouds full of the water vapors, when the sun shines through them, often creates a rainbow, a beautiful rainbow of red and orange. See if I can remember the colors in order: red and orange and yellow and blue and green. Is that correct? And indigo. I think I'm getting all of them. But so the different ones, the rainbow colors, and still really in their same colors of the color spectrum. We see it across there after a rain, or sometimes even during a rain, but oftentimes after a rain. Of course, if there's no clouds in the sky, there's no rainbows. But God established this as a promise, a reminder, a sign of the promise that He made, so that every time it rained, remember, because the indication of Scripture is that it did not rain before the flood took place. Okay, so I would think if I were Noah and his sons, especially, and the animals, that anytime water started falling from the sky, I would wonder, is this another destroying flood coming? And I should go to higher ground. And He says, no, I will not destroy all the world and all life again with water, with floods. And my rainbow will remind you of that. So that, and we still get that still today. That promise is still, that token is still there today. Verse 14, and it shall come to pass when I bring a cloud over the earth that the bow shall be seen in the cloud. And verse 15, and I will remember my covenant, my promise, which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh. Okay, so God's just reinforcing this, because I'm sure Noah and his wife may have had confidence in God, but his sons and their wives, I'm sure, were fearful that God would destroy again. They didn't want to wander far from the ark. They were worried every time they saw clouds, and every time it began to rain. They were worried, they were concerned, and God's making promises to them. And instinctively, of course, animals the same way. And so it shall come to pass when I bring a cloud over the earth, the bow shall be seen in the cloud. And I will remember, verse 15, my covenant, my promises, which between me and you and every living creature of all flesh. And here's the promise, and the water shall no more become a flood, a mabul, a catastrophic deluge to destroy all flesh. Once again, not a promise of no local floods, but a promise of no worldwide flood. And it's a reminder, the rainbow is a reminder of God's promise. Verse 16, and the bow shall be in the cloud, and I will look upon it that I may remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all the flesh that is upon the earth. So it's even, God says, it even helps me to remember, not that God forgets, but as a reminder, especially to the people, of God's promises. And then what I put down here, let's read verse 17. And God said to Noah, directly He said to Noah, this is the token, the sign, the rainbow of the covenant, of the promise, which I have established between me and all flesh that's upon the earth. So here's this theme that I've addressed to you earlier in this class on a couple occasions. This theme that we saw established or instituted there during the time after after Adam and Eve sinned, that in mercy God remembers, in judgment God remembers mercy, in wrath God remembers mercy. God was very merciful toward Adam and Eve, and on it goes, merciful toward Cain. Cain didn't think so. Merciful in these different ways. The theme is in wrath, God remembers mercy, and he gives his sign, his rainbow, as a sign or a symbol to us, just like we have other symbols. And of course, to us, the rainbow is not as significant to us as it was to Noah and his family, because they had just lived through this terrible destruction. But maybe to us, the greatest symbol, the greatest token we have to remind us of God's mercy is the cross of Christ. And that's why many Christians have crosses in their homes, or some have crosses, some folks wear crosses on a necklace as a reminder of God's sacrifice for us, the sacrifice of Christ for us, and what Christ did for us on the cross. It's a symbol. The cross does not save us. The rainbow does not protect us. There are signs, there are symbols of God's mercy, and we praise God for that. Okay, let's move on to the next event before we take our break. And next event deals with a kind of sad, well, not kind of, but with a sad event. Sorry, I skipped ahead somehow. Oh, wait a minute, I'm gonna give a little overview. I'm sorry, let me do a little overview first, and then we'll get that sad event. And that is in verses 18 and 19, we have a little bit of preview as to his sons and what has happened from the descendants of his sons. We'll look at this, and I think we'll take our break after this. And we'll come back we'll take a break a little early probably, and come back a little early. So let's see. Verses 18 and 19. And the sons of Noah that went forth of the ark were, here the names are again, Shem and Ham and Japheth. And Ham is the father of Canaan. That will become significant in a little bit. And these are the three sons of Noah, and of them, verse 19 emphasizes this, and of them, of these three sons, was the whole earth overspread or populated. So what he's telling us here is that Noah had three sons. We know this already. We were introduced to them back in chapter 5, actually, into chapter 5, and then chapter 6. And they went on the ark with Noah, and his three sons' names are right here listed. We'll talk about them a little more, the rest of the day. We'll talk about Shem, Ham, and Japheth. But Shem is one son, Ham is a second son, and then Japheth. And we'll especially study them in the second hour. We do know, as a preview here, that the Messiah, that Jesus, came through the line of Shem. Of course, some other significant people who came through Shem are people like Abraham, of course, Isaac and Jacob. Of course, they came through Shem. David came through Shem, of course, and Jesus. And the listing of them we can find, as I put down here in Luke 3:36, we find Shem listed there as a descendant, the son of Noah, but also as the father of many of our patriarchs in Luke 3:36. And then the second son we have by his name is Ham, and we're told just briefly here in verse 18 that Ham is the father. Where is it? There it is. Ham is the father of Canaan, and Ham. Talk about the youngest, and then Japheth. Japheth. Now a lot of information about Japheth, and so 924. I'm sorry, 924 deals with the youngest. He's the youngest. I'm trying to figure out why I put 924 there. Genesis 924 tells us that the Japheth, the Ham was his youngest. We'll get to that in just a few minutes. And then the third son is Japheth. So Shem, Ham, and Japheth, from these three sons of Noah, all of us have come. All us, not just all of us, every human being has come. People have said in study of anthropology that there are 3 to 6 people groups in our world. I want to spend just a little bit of time just emphasizing this. Is why we're going to take our break after this. Our world, oftentimes, our cultures oftentimes refer to races, different races. Races is, so they talk about different races. They talk about different, based on people's different colors and so forth. The Bible teaches there is only one human race. just one human race. We've all descended through Noah. We've all descended from one of Noah's sons. We've all, of course, tracked back to Adam and Eve. Races is a term that was introduced into our culture and being yours as well, with the heavy influence of Britain and India, by evolutionary thought, evolutionary thinking. That's a way to try to describe the different people live in different places, the different skin colors. We're going to talk about all this the next time when we get to chapter 11. But biblically speaking, there's only one human race, and it's important we understand that. And that's important too, because I know you have different caste system that's very similar to this idea of racism in your culture. But he's making it very clear to us in chapter 9, verse 19, of these three sons, all three sons of Noah, the whole earth was overspread. There was no Lucy. If you know these things about evolution, there was no Lucy ancestor born in Africa, and some people descended from Lucy, and some people descended from other groups. The Chinese has an idea about this, about there's some ancestral Chinese, and the Bible says we've all come through Noah. We've all come through one of his three sons. There's only one race. Chapter 10, verse 32. These are the families of the sons of Noah after their generations in their nations. And by these three sons of Noah were the nations divided in the earth after the flood. And so we're all descendants from there. Now, today in our world, we have 150 plus nations in our world. We have 3,000 plus tribal languages and tribal languages and dialects, but we're still all for one human race. Well, we look differently. How do we explain that? Well, we explain that from chapter 11. I'll talk about that the next time we have class. But I do want to end by looking over in Acts 17. And we'll look at Acts 17, and then we'll take our break and be back in Genesis 9 after our break. But in Acts 17, as Paul is preaching to the pagans there in Greece, as Paul is preaching there on Mars Hill, there in Athens, and these were intelligent, highly educated people there in Greece. They prided themselves on this. These were the leaders. This was the United Nations of their day, if you would. This is where all the intellects went. This is where debates took place. This is where laws were made. The Greeks had prided themselves on all this, even before, and of course at this time the Romans had conquered the Greeks, but the Greeks were very proud of these very things. And Paul is preaching to these pagans, who he goes into Athens. This is in Acts 17. I'd like for you to look at this passage as we conclude. As he's going into Athens to meet with these men, to preach the gospel to them. He knows of their intellect, he knows of their reasoning, he knows of their debating, but he also knows of their superstition. And their superstition is recognized as he went in there and saw all these idols and all these different icons made to these different gods. Not as many gods as you have in India, but in the same mindset at least. And they were also superstitious and religious, is another way of saying that. And they're very religious people, as the Indians are today, especially Hindus are today. And all these different gods they're worshiping, and Paul went to preach the one true God to them. And let's see how he describes the one true God. He's a Mars Hill, verse 22. This is Acts 17, verse 22. He's a Mars Hill. And he says, "You men of Athens, I perceive that in all things you are too superstitious, you are too religious." Maybe another way of saying that. "For I passed by and beheld your devotions, your sacrifices. I found an altar with the inscription, 'To the unknown God.'" Paul says, "I'm come to preach you the unknown God. You don't know who he is, I'm his representative. Whom therefore you ignorantly worship, I declare to you," verse 24, he tells them who they are, who he is. He's a creator, God that made the world and all things therein. Okay, so first of all, this unknown God is the creator. "Seeing that he is Lord of heaven and earth, he dwells not in temples made with hands." So he's too big to dwell in your little temples that you try to build for him. Verse 25, "Neither is he worshipped with man's hands." He doesn't need us. He doesn't need the food we bring. He doesn't need anything from us, as though he needed anything, seeing he giveth to all life and breath and all things. So he doesn't need us. We need him. And we can't bring him down to our level. We can't build a house and put him in there. He's too big for all that. In fact, he's given us everything we have, including our life and our breath and all things. And he said in verse 26, and this creator God hath made of one blood, all nations of men to dwell on the face of the earth. Okay, we're all descended from, we're all humans. That's the only race. We're all descended through Noah and the rest. One blood, one human race, all nations of the world. Today we have 150 plus nations. I think it's 160 some now. One blood, all nations of the world to dwell on the face of the earth, and had determined the times before appointed and the bounds of their habitation. God's given us certain limits. We have borders, we have continent borders, we have nation borders as well. But we're all of the same blood, and he's made himself clear to us through nature and through our own conscience, and that they should seek the Lord, if haply they might feel after him and find him, though he be not far from every one of us. He is our creator, and he's not just a creator of Indians or Westerners or Chinese. He's the creator of all humans, and that traces all the way back to Noah and his sons. So we'll pick up there after our break. Let's go ahead and take our break at this time. And at the end of chapter this, and then chapter 10, I plan to have some time for questions. So let's take our break, and I'll see you in about 10 minutes.
Yes, brother.
Let's go ahead and pray, and then we will
Yes,
get into this. Hold on a second. Let me make sure we're all muted. All right, looks like we're good now. All right, let's go ahead and continue then with a word of prayer. Sorry about that. Father, we pray you continue to bless our studies, teach us from your word. Thank you for your promises. Help me be able to communicate your message today, and help the students continue to learn and benefit from the study of biblical foundations. We pray in Christ's name. Amen. All right, let's go ahead and continue through this part, actually a very sad part of Noah's life, personal life. Of course, he's already been through the flood, but then we get this sad event that's recorded for us by the Lord here in Genesis chapter 9, maybe as a warning to us all, that you can live godly and obey the Lord for all these years and still be tempted or have a problem. But let's talk about what happened here in Genesis chapter 9, beginning verse 20. And Noah began to be a husbandman, as we know, he's like a farmer, or a tender of grapes, or a tender of vineyards. He began to be a husbandman, a farmer, and he planted a vineyard. And he drank of the wine and was drunken, and he was uncovered within the tent. So here we had Noah. He becomes a farmer, and perhaps he did some of that before. Also, before the flood, probably did some because he had to build the ark. He wasn't going out necessarily hunting, probably, unless that was occasional. He wouldn't have to do that every day. So he probably was a farmer some before the time of the flood, and so here he is farming again. But things were different after the flood. You know, things were different. They probably had grapes and other vineyards before the flood. Probably, we don't know for sure, but things were different. The process of fermentation was probably different after the flood with the major climate changes. Remember, sun was now beating down harder. There was nothing filtering the sun out. That affected how long people lived. That was part of the problem. There was an aging process on people that comes today that we have from the sun that can cause cancers and so forth. There's also the aspect from the sun that affects our storms. You know, a lot of times the storms, the typhoons, the cyclones that we have are a result of the climate as well. And so things were different after the flood. Things were quite a bit different. And so not only did it affect human life, but it also probably affected vegetation life. And so the process of fermentation was probably changed. So even if he had drank grape juice before the flood, things would have been different afterwards. I'm sure they had even on the ark. I would think they would have some juices that were there, but things were different after the flood. And Noah probably didn't understand that. I don't think we don't even fully understand it because we don't have both to choose from. He's the one who lived on both sides of the flood, before and after. Noah's the one that lived before and after what probably happened with the vapor canopy. Before, when he lived in that life and he was living up to 600 years of age, and 600 years of age, he is out building an ark with, I'm sure, sons and hired people. I mean, I can't imagine being 600 years of age and doing physical labor like that, but he was able to because of the body aged differently before the flood. And this is also the first mention of wine in the scriptures we have here, but yet the Bible says a lot about wine and strong drink. I actually have a 3-week series. I do 3 different messages. I do 3 hours of teaching I do on wine in the Bible, because it's such a big issue. It's a big issue in the United States, big issue worldwide. And wine in the Bible, I could just say, I'm in summary here quickly. Wine in the Bible is not the same as the wine of today. The wine of today oftentimes is fermented quite a bit, and the wine of the Bible was also, the wine of the Bible is fermented too. Let me say that. But the wine of the Bible times, with Old and New Testament, was drank primarily for hygiene reasons, because of all the water was dirty, and so the wine and alcohol content in the wine would help to kill the germs, the bacteria, and other things. But also, we have studied in the scripture, as well as outside scripture, in the culture of the Old New Testament, that only a crazy person would drink undiluted wine. In fact, it was called strong drink in Proverbs, for instance. So it was important to understand that they diluted their wine down because they did not drink alcohol in order to get drunk. They didn't drink it in order to get buzzed, as they call it here in the States. I'm not sure what they call it here there in India, but they drink alcohol in order to not drink dirty water. Really, the need to drink wine today is really not there as it was in Bible times, because we can get filtered water. I just helped one of our preachers there in India who's had problems with typhoid fever a couple times, drinking dirty water. I just helped him raise some funds and get a whole house water filter. So there are opportunities there. Of course, there's many other things you can do. We can boil water today. That was much more tedious for Noah to do. Much more tedious for Noah to be able to do, to boil water, for instance. They could, but it was much more tedious for them to do that than it is for us. So that aspect of it. Of course, you could drink milk from your domesticated animals, your cows, your goats, but that was kind of expensive. Of course, you could also drink fresh grape juice or fresh juice, but that's a limited time in which you have a growing season. And so if it wasn't drank fresh, then when you're squeezing it out, it would begin to naturally ferment already. So they would dilute the wine. So let's look at a few verses in Proverbs quickly, and just understand that just because Noah drank wine doesn't mean it's okay for us to drink wine. And just because the argument they always say, like I said, I have 3 hours materials on this. I'm trying to limit it to 3 minutes. I'm having a hard time. Jesus made wine. Well, Jesus made also that word wine, the Greek word wine, oinos, can also be translated fresh grape juice. So don't buy all the different excuses, even among Christians, they make about it's okay to drink alcoholic beverages today. I don't get into that. I don't think that's true, but I'll have to teach on that in another class, 3 hours of teaching. But let's see what Proverbs says quickly. Proverbs 20 verse 1, wine is a mocker. Strong drink, which is undiluted wine, is really what strong drink was in Solomon's time. So wine was diluted, fermented alcohol. Undiluted strong drink is raging, and whosoever is deceived thereby is not wise. So shows how easy we can be deceived by drinking alcohol, especially undiluted alcohol, and it's unwise altogether. Proverbs 23 gives the warning of the person who drinks the undiluted, especially wine, where in verse 31 it says, look not thou, in fact we're commanded here, verse 31, Proverbs 23, look not thou upon the wine when it is red, when it giveth its color in the cup, when it moveth itself aright. So it's actually talking about here is wine that's still in the fermenting process, it's still moving a little bit as it's doing that, got a little bite to it. Well, I say it bites like a serpent, stings like an adder. Thine eyes shall behold strange women we should not be looking at. Thine heart shall utter perverse things, will say things we wouldn't say, because alcohol, people begin drinking alcohol, you begin to lose your inhibitions, you begin to lose your ability to say no to women, your ability to say no or control your tongue. And so he's warning about that. Verse 34, yea, thou shalt be as he that lieth down in the midst of the sea, and he that lieth upon the top of the mast. We don't know where we're lying down. We've all probably, if you live in any cities, and most of you have been in the cities in India, you'll see someone drinking, someone who's drunk, they're laying around the sidewalk. Sometimes they're lying right there in the gutter and a back street laying in filth. They don't understand. They're not thinking right because they're under the influence of alcohol. And verse 35, and they have stricken me, thou shalt say, and I was not sick. They have beaten me, and I felt it not, because he's drunk. And when I awake, I'm gonna go and get another drink. Basically what he says, have the foolishness there. And then in chapter 31, just a warning there that those of us in leadership, including those in governmental leadership, should stay away from alcohol. As the writer of Proverbs says, Proverbs 31. It is not for kings, O Lemuel, it's not for kings to drink wine. So not even to be drinking the wine itself that could somehow influence our thinking, influence our decision making. End of verse 4, and nor for princes to drink strong drink. He said, lest they drink and forget the law and pervert the judgment of the afflicted. They're not thinking right. We often don't think clearly and correctly if we're under the influence of alcohol. Verse 6, he gives the kind of the exception, if you would. Give strong drink to him that is ready to perish, and wine to those of heavy heart. So you get someone who is dying, and they're in terrible pain, then they give an exception. That helps that'll help to numb the pain some. Of course, today in our world, even in India as well, there are other medications they can give people to help them in the dying time, not to suffer where they're very painful. But that was really the only exception that was given. As in the New Testament, where Paul said to Timothy, drink a little wine for thy stomach's sake. Apparently, Timothy was drinking water right out of the city well or whatever else that was contaminated and dirty, and was not using any alcohol at all to kill the bacteria in the water. And Timothy, this is 1 Timothy 5, verse 22, 23. Timothy was suffering the effects of stomach problems, of diarrhea and other problems that we have from bacteria being in his body, and which could kill you, as you know. And so that was the only exception. Today, we live a different time. We can boil our water, we can buy bottled water, we can buy other beverages as well. And so there's really no excuse. I have found no excuse for a Christian to drink alcohol at all in our world in which we live. Well, back in Noah's time, he drank, and it was something that was done probably before the flood. Something they probably did some on. He had plenty of fresh water falling from the sky. That's something they probably had some limited effects or ability to go have some of the alcohol, or not alcohol, but have some of the juice that they took on the ark. But Noah drank, and it affected him differently than it did before, probably because of the climate change. And so Noah got drunk, the Bible tells us. And Noah became drunk and uncovered himself. And so let's read that as we go along here. End of verse 21 says, and he was uncovered within his tent, talking about Noah. He was drunk, he drank of the wine, was drunken. he uncovered himself within his tent. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw, and that's you'll be getting here, the Hebrew word is gazed upon the nakedness of his father. So Ham saw his father's nakedness, and he went out and told his two brothers. And so going back here to what I was saying here, Noah became drunk, uncovered himself. That just reminds us of 1 Peter 5:8. Be sober, be vigilant, for the adversary of the devil walks about seeking whom he may devour. Or 1 Corinthians 10:12-13. Just a warning there, let him that thinketh he stand, take heed lest he fall. There is no temptation taken you, but such as is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not permit or suffer us to be tempted above what we're able, but will with that temptation provide a way to escape that we may be able to bear it. And so he became drunk. He did not need to. He wasn't being vigilant. And once again, we're careful. Noah was a godly man. Noah was a man who obeyed God. I think it was more like a deception, not knowing the changes that took place. I don't think Noah went out and wanted to just go get drunk or was having a bad day and got drunk. I don't think that's what happened. But what about Ham's sin? What about Ham's sin? In chapter 9, verse 22, where Ham came in and saw his father, his godly father, naked within the tent because he was drunk, wasn't thinking about what he was doing, and it was hot, and took his clothes off or whatever else. And he went in and he gazed upon his father, verse 22 says. And it was just some argue that this was homosexual lust, or even some would go so far trying to press or squeeze in the scripture their feelings that this actually a homosexual act was done by Ham on his father. I don't see that. I think that's someone who's trying to justify their own sin or their own lust. I don't think it was lust or even an act that took place. I think what was happening, especially since he went out and told his two brothers about it, was a disrespect toward his father. That's what I believe is happening. Ham gazed on his father, and then he went out and told with delight to his brothers, hey, we all think dad's so godly. Well, go see dad now. He's all drunk. He's all laid out naked there in the tent. What a shameful, what an embarrassment dad is. And I think I think Ham was delighted that they found their perfect dad, their godly dad, Noah. Was not as perfect as they oftentimes thought he was, or actually as God maybe thought he was. And so here we have Noah spread out in the tent, and his son comes in and disrespects him. So the third paragraph down, I think Ham's sin, and many conservative Bible commentators also believe this as well. Ham's sin seems to be that disrespecting his father, going out and telling his brother, especially in contrast with the honorable response of his brothers. Verse 23 records, he went out and told his brothers, verse 22, what was going on, and with seemingly the Hebrew implies with delight. Verse 23, and Shem and Japheth, Ham's brothers, took a garment and laid it upon both of their shoulders and went backward and covered the nakedness of their father. And their faces were backward, and they saw not their father's nakedness. So I think the scripture contrasts what a difference between Ham and his gazing, his delighting, and disrespecting his father, and his brother's responses. They did not even want to look at their father. They took some clothing, they backed into the tent without looking at their father, and dropped it. When they got to his feet, dropped the clothes, the garment on their father to cover him up. Well, obviously, after some time, Noah woke up, and it says, verse 24, and Noah woke from the wine. So he woke up from his drunken stupor, and he knew what his younger son, what Ham, had done unto him. And the idea of the word there, knew, the Hebrew word implies this idea that he discovered by inquiry. He asked, and we can understand that. He probably woke up, and he's in his tent, and he finds himself covered by some garment that was not his, that maybe belonged to one of the boys, maybe belonged to someone else. It was just outside the tent. And and he probably, why is this garment on top of me? Who put this here? And then he perhaps he looked and realized he was naked. And so he began asking his sons what had happened, and others what had happened. Perhaps he asked his wife what had happened, and of course the boys knew what had happened. Told them what their son, what their brother Ham had done, and so he found out what Ham had done by asking. And so then we have this curse being pronounced, and it's also called the Noahic Prophecy that we find here in verses 25 through 27. Oftentimes called that, like I said, a prophecy. He's given blessings and curses to his children, blessings and curses that many that we actually see to a certain degree today, probably more prominent during the time, during the generations after these boys. Perhaps they saw some of this begin to take place. But Noah gave this prophecy at that time. And I'll let you jot some of this down as I take a sip here. Verse 25. And so Noah gave this prophecy that's concerning his sons. And he said, first of all, cursed be Canaan. Now, Canaan was the son of Ham. Perhaps we don't know why he skipped a generation, or if he wanted to limit. Why did God limit it to Canaan? Maybe because it was just one part of Ham's descendants. That's probably it. Instead of cursing the whole 1/3 of the line, 1/3 of the humans. And so we have Canaan. Of course, Canaan is the ancestor of the Canaanites, who were the arch enemies of David and Saul and so forth. At that time, they lived there along the coast of Israel. Of course, they lived also in Cana, and they were a problem also, we know, for Joshua and for the generation that came back there, so the Canaanites, and what was involved there. And so he gives us curse to Canaan. Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall be he unto his brethren. So the curse on Canaan, just one of Ham's son. I'm not so sure what percentage that would work out to be, but one of Ham's sons, it was Canaan, and he is believed to be the ancestor of the Canaanites, like I said, who went down the coast west of, we'll look at a map in just a minute, but west of Israel, in the land of Canaan, Canaanites, and then descended down around to Egypt and all the way down into Africa. We'll be looking at some maps in just a moment. And so that's what that's believed, not by my understanding, but by researchers and scientists. And then there was a blessedness on Shem, verse 26. And he said, blessed be the Lord God of Shem. And Canaan, once again, emphasize Canaan, curse of Canaan, one of the sons of Ham, shall be his servant. So the Lord blessed Shem. Shem is believed to be the ancestor of course, the Messiah and of the Jews, but also of many of the other Mid-East nations. Many of the Arab and Muslim nations are descendants also of Shem. And it seems like the emphasis there, the emphasis of Canaan, you don't know anything about Ham, but Canaan was on service. That's emphasized again in verse 26. Whoops, sorry. But the emphasis on Sham's descendants were spiritual considerations. And that's why we see them, basically the Jews and the Muslims, especially around Israel, the Muslims around Israel, the initial Muslims, Saudi Arabia and all, spiritual considerations. And then verse 27, and God shall enlarge Japheth, and he shall be dwell in the tents of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant. So here Noah gave another blessing in a sense to Japheth, and who is believed to be an ancestor of the Europeans. He will dwell in a tent, so he will be a nomad. He'll be leaving that area and traveling, which kind of makes sense, going to Europe, for instance, and so forth. But also the emphasis in verse 27, that Canaan shall be his servant. So it's interesting how this is carried out. Very little said about Ham, who actually committed the sin, but his son, Canaan, one of his sons, Canaan, actually suffered the effects of that. So we see the Noahic prophecy, and then the last part of chapter 9, I just write down verses 20 and 29. And Noah lived after the flood 350 years. And all the days of Noah were 950 years. And Noah lived to be 950 years old. And then here's this saying again that we saw in chapter 5. And he died. Not part of God's original plan, but a result still of sin. Noah was 600 years old at the time of the flood and lived another 350 years after that and died. He said, and I wrote down from the research and from commentators, it is likely that Noah lived until after the dispersion of the nations of Babel. We'll talk about that more next time we meet together. And then I wrote down lastly some similarities between Adam and Noah. If you think about the two, both Adam and his descendants and Noah and his descendants were commanded to fill and populate the earth. Both Adam and Noah are ancestors of all peoples from his time on. So Adam was the ancestor and the father of all the people down through the flood, including Noah and his sons, all the way to us today. But Noah then also became an ancestor. We all went through the line of Noah. Noah, of course, and he had 3 sons, and we all descended from one of those 3 sons, but we all came through Noah as well. So he's an ancestor of all peoples from his time on. Both Adam and Noah sinned by partaking of fruit. Of course, Adam sinned as his wife gave him the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Noah sinned by partaking of the fruit of the vine. Both were naked and were provided covering. Adam discovered that God had made him naked, and his innocency was not a problem. But after he sinned, he hid from God. One thing he said to God is, "Excuse, I know I was naked," and God provided him a clothing from one of the lambs. Noah was also naked after his sin, and he was provided covering by his sons. Both gave prophecies resulting in a curse that was involved there, and the curse that was involved, the prophecy was given to Adam through God of the curses of chapter 3, curse on Lucifer, curse on the snake, curse on humans, curse on men, curse on women, and curse on the earth altogether. Of course, Noah gave this curse primarily to Canaan. And then lastly, the blessings and anticipation of salvation, both of them experienced. And so they both had similarities, Adam and Noah did, even though they never knew each other. Noah was 10 generations, I believe, after Adam, in the line of Christ still, but never knew each other, obviously. But they're very similar in a lot of ways. And both very, in a sense, truthfully, very both godly men for us to emulate. So we're just told Noah probably lived into and lived through the dispersion that took place at Babel, which we'll be studying next time we come together. Now, the rest of the time, we're going to really move into chapter 10. And I'm not even going to read all of chapter 10, but I'm going to highlight some of chapter 10 to you. You've been reading it yourself. But chapter 10 has been called the Table of Nations. The Table of Nations. It's oftentimes what it's called. Look what it says here. Genesis 10:1 marks the end of the 4th main subdivision in Genesis. Remember that little formula I told you about? First time we see is in chapter 2, verse 4, I believe, and then chapter 5, verse 1, and then chapter 6, I think it's around verse 9. Oh, I have it listed here. Never mind. I'm sorry. Doing it from memory. But this is the 4th one where it says, chapter 10, verse 1 says, "Now these are the generations of the sons of Noah." Okay, that same little formula. First Adam, and then the earth, first the earth, the creation, then of Adam, and then of Noah, and here begins with Noah as well. And it marks the end of the fourth main subdivision. Each major subdivision ends with the statement, "Now these are the generations up." And here's the breakdown of the of the different subdivisions, going all the way into Exodus chapter 1, verse 1. Genesis 10 is considered a remarkably accurate historical document. Okay, this is not what just what the Bible says, nor is this just what Bible scholars say. This is also true of many who study history. It's remarkably accurate historical document of how the different nations spread out, where people migrated and went to different parts of the world. And it says this, with no comparable catalog of ancient nations available as this. Though there's lots of things that verify this statement. And there are some of these different nations or people groups that we're not even aware of, but we do know of some. So I'm going to highlight some of those to you as we move through here. So chapter 10 is called this Table of Nations. And it's like the people, the scholars have said, it's highly accurate historical document. And so let's begin looking at the Table of Nations. Like I said, I'm not going to read the whole chapter to you because you've been doing that. But verse 1 says, "Now these are the generations of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and unto them were sons born after the flood, as God told them to." And so we have a listing here of the different sons. Verse 2 talks about the sons of Japheth, the sons of Japheth. And Japheth is there, and with Japheth's life, we find out of his sons. And so let's move on to Japheth's life. Many of Japheth's descendants live in Europe today, or at one time did, as well as Asia and North and South America. Chapter 10 verses 1 through 5. In fact, it says this, even this says in verse 5, "By these, from the descendants of Japheth and his sons, were the isles of the Gentiles divided in their lands, everyone after his tongue, after their families, in their nations." And so even the isles of Gentiles and throughout the world. So a lot of the Gentiles, if you would, were descendants of Japheth, Europe, Asia, because we have Gog and Magog, Gomer, and these different things we're somewhat familiar with. We're talking about a few of these different places. Tarshish here, these different places. It's written this, by the way, and this was written out obviously after the Tower of Babel. So this is kind of a historical document that kind of weeds its way through what happens in chapter 11. Chapter 11 tells us what happens, but here it just gives us a document that begins right after the flood with Noah and his sons, and then they begin having children, and then the Tower of Babel dispersion takes place, but then we continue to have a record of how people dispersed after that. So we have Japheth, first of all. Many of the people who live in Europe, according to what we're going to look at in a second, many of these people live in Europe, Asia, and North South America are descendants of Japheth. Here's a map. You may want to, if you have a phone, your phone, you may just want to take a picture of this or a screenshot of this, because I only can leave this up so long. But this is obviously a map of the world. Well, not of the world, but of mainly Europe and Northern Africa and some of Asia. As you would know, this is India over here, your home country. And that's about, and only part of that's showing. So that's all you can see. Of course, up here are some of the other Mid-East countries and Pakistan and Iraq, over here into these areas, and Iran and Afghanistan, all this going on. And then up here we get into the Russia, Ukraine, Russia, Ukraine with Gomer and Magog, and Siberia and the other Russian satellite countries. You come back over here, we're getting more into the Mid-East countries. Come over this way, and we're getting, well, I'm sorry, here's Iraq and Kuwait and all these countries over here. I'm sorry. over this way, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and the other little Muslim countries down here. And of course, this is modern day. This is where Israel is in this area of the world, and Syria above it, Lebanon, Syria above that. This is Turkey, modern day Turkey. And of course, this goes in over into Eastern Europe. And this, of course, is Western Europe, or what we call Europe today for the most part. Here's even Tarshish, which is in modern day Spain. Here's the United Kingdom or Great Britain. That's all up here. Of course, this is Africa, Northern Africa, and so forth. So, so we begin to see the descendants of of course, they were coming out. Let me just say this too. They were here somewhere in this region of the world is where the ark landed after the flood. Somewhere here in far eastern Turkey, in the mountains of Ararat, right in this part of the world. And so geographical center of the world, if you would, has been called, especially of Europe, Asia, and Africa. And so from there, people descended and began to spread out. We'll talk next month, or excuse me, next week, about why people were spreading out different directions. They did. So first we have Japheth being introduced, first 5 verses of chapter 10, and his descendants basically began to head out toward Gog and Magog, Gog and Gomer, and these areas this way up into modern day Russia and into Asia, and they spread out this way. Some went into Europe that way, and so we see a lot of that going on. Of course, from Europe, many of the North and South America was then populated, as well as from Asia. There were tribes that went over from Asia over into North and South America. That's for another story and another study of anthropology. But here's Japheth's descendants. So his descendants went that way after the Tower of Babel. Okay, so hopefully take a screenshot of that. Because I'm going to show you this map a couple more times. But so we're talking about Japheth and his family came with Noah out of the ark, and they began to spread this way. They began to spread north and east, as well as north and west. All right. And then verses 6 to 20 gives us a list of Ham's descendants. Verse 6 says, and the sons of Ham were Cush and Mizraim and Phut and Canaan. So here we have 4 sons. The only one that got the curse, we know from back earlier on, chapter 9, the curse of Noah's prophecy was on Canaan, but there were 3 other brothers also. Many of Ham's descendants live in Africa and the Mid-East today. Most notably of his descendants that were listed there were, of course, Nimrod, verse 8, and Cush begat Nimrod. This is verse 8 of chapter 10. He became a mighty one in the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord, and the beginning of his kingdom, of Nimrod's kingdom, was Babel, which was the ancient beginning of Babylon, there in Iraq, modern day Iraq. And so Nimrod's name means let us rebel. Nimrod became a world leader of rebellion, as we're told right here in verse 8, the mighty one in all the earth, or in the earth. And so he's a world leader of rebellion. Nimrod was Noah's great grandson, as we trace this back. Nimrod's the son of Cush. Cush is the son of Ham. Ham is the son of Noah. Noah's great grandson. He, verse 12, built a great city. We're told there, the great city. Oh no, I'm sorry. That's not about Nimrod. This is going on. So a great city also we find was built there in that area, which came down to beyond the aspect of beyond the aspect of Babel. A great city, chapter 10, verse 12 was built. So here we have the idea that men began to stay together in a metropolitan complex of these 3 cities were approximately 200 miles north of Babylon along the Tigris River. We'll look at that in a second. And also from Ham came the Philistines, the arch enemies, part of the overlap with the Canaanites, the arch enemies of Israel, as well as the Hittites. chapter 10, verse 15. The word there in verse 15 is actually Heth, and for years, skeptics would say there's no record of any Heth, group of Heth, and so we can't trust what the Bible is saying this. And then they came across an archaeological find where the Hittites and the Heth are identified as the same people. This is all going on. But also in verse 17, we see that Sinite being listed there, which is an old word for China. That's there. Mizmain, verse 13, old name for Egypt. Ashur, verse 11, old name for Assyria. And so we see, verse 6, Mizrain, actually old name for Egypt, as I said also later on, verse 13. And then Foot, an old name, verse 6, an old name for Libya. And so we see these on the map as well. So we're seeing descendants of Ham. He has 4 sons. One was Canaan. Canaan kind of descended there. They kind of came down here, descended from this area. Philistines came from them. And then others went down into here. Foot, one of Ham's sons. Mizrain, one of his sons. So we had Canaan and Mizrain and Foot. These are all identified right here on the map. The other son was Cush. And Cush is down here further down, old Ethiopia. So for the most part, the sons of Ham were Canaan, who lived right here near Israel in the Promised Land. Foot, Mizrain, and Cush. They all kind of settled this way and eventually inhabited and populated Africa. So we see that going on. And then as we go back to the table of nations, we then go to Shem's descendants, found in verses 21 through 31. And Shem's descendants were extremely important, of course, because they were the Messiah descended from them. Of note there, we have Eber, who's mentioned in verse 21, under Shem, also the father of all the children of Eber, who's a brother of Japheth, the elder. Even to him were children born. And so here we have Eber. Eber is the father of the Hebrews. The Hebrews and the Jews eventually came from Eber, which obviously was a descendant also of Shem. Next verse, verse 22, tells us about children of Shem were Elam, Asher, and Arphaxad, and Lud and Amram. Arphaxad is in the line of Christ as we look at chapter 3 of Luke. So we have Shem, Eber, Arphaxad going down. And then verse 25 makes an interesting statement. Eber named one of his sons Peleg, and unto Eber was born 2 sons. The name of the one was Peleg. And for in his days the earth divided, and his brother's name was Joktan. Eber named one of his sons Peleg, which means division. That's what the Hebrew word means. And apparently he was born the year of the dispersion or division from Babel. Okay, so that's believe what he did. And we do the same thing today. Sometimes a major event takes place in our area or even in our world. Some people name their children after that as a reminder of that. Maybe the wife is expecting as the event takes place. And that's what everyone's thinking about. And the child's born soon afterwards. Well, people will name their child after that. That would happen, especially in Bible times. And so Peleg was named probably after the dispersion of Babel, probably born that same year, near the same time when the dispersion took place. We'll talk about that at the next time we come back. So here we have now, we have the descendants of Shem, which for the most part, here's Arphaxad. But here are some of the other ones that descended from Shem also, mainly living in this part of the world, mainly living in Muslim part of the world and the around Israel at this time. And so we see these descendants here, Queen of Sheba, so forth. But we see these descendants here of Shem living really in this part of the world right here. And still living there for the most part today. Okay, let me see. About wrapped up here. So the descendants of Noah, here's a summary. 26 nationalities descended from Shem, 30 nationalities descended from Ham, and 14 nationalities descended from Japheth. Shem and his descendants primarily there in Europe, modern day Russia area, and into Asia. Ham's descendants primarily into Africa, and I'm sorry, not Shem. Shem's descendants primarily in what we call the Mideast, that part of the world. Japheth's descendants primarily in Europe, Russia area, and Asia, and Ham's descendants primarily there in Africa. Who was the father, or from whom of these did the Indians descend? I've heard different Indians tell me that. I'll let you all work on that yourself and decide where you fit into that. But these are the table of nations we find in chapter 10 of Genesis. Okay, homework for next week, and then we'll see the final questions. Once you continue to read through Genesis 9 through 11, that will help. Actually, it's not for next week. I'm sorry, it's for 2 weeks from now. Next week, I will be away on a missions conference, traveling out in California. It'll be very difficult for me to be able to teach this class. So we're going to take next Wednesday off and meet again in 2 weeks from today. So for 2 weeks from today, I have two major assignments. Read Genesis 9 through 11. Once again, it puts us all together, this antediluvian, this time after the flood, through the Tower of Babel. Read that at least 5 times over the next 2 weeks. And then your last sermon, work on and plan to turn in on November the 10th. And this was going to be a sermon drawn off a major theme throughout our whole study of biblical foundations, dealing with creation of man and dealing with being made in the image of God. Draw from Genesis 1:27, this third, your fourth and your last sermon for this course. These sermons that are given to you as an encouragement to help you prepare these to preach in your churches or in your schools or wherever you are. But verse 27, so God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he them, male and female created he them. And verse 27, in that one verse, though we see it repeated throughout Genesis 1 through 11, that we see it created actually all throughout the Bible, deals with 3 major topics. And so you incorporate that into your message. Number 1, that God created us. God created humans. Number 2, that God created humans in his image. And what does that mean? And why is that important? And that God created humans, male and female, and that's it. Not male, female, and 25 different other genders. Male and female, just 2. And that's very important in our modern day as well. And deal with these truths that I put here. Deal with these truths from both the Old Testament and New Testament, including verses such as, but not limited to, Genesis 5, 1-2, Genesis 9-6, Matthew 19, 3 through 9, James 3, 9 through 12, and other passages. Incorporate that into your sermon. It's a sermon that you'll have 2 weeks to work on. No class next week, nothing more to study for as far as any quizzes or anything. We plan to have a final exam, Lord willing, on November 17th. But as you are reading through this and working through this, you'll be preparing for your final exam. If you finish your sermon early, you can go ahead and begin reviewing your notes. But we'll have a final exam on November 17th. So we have 2 more weeks of class. Next time, 2 weeks from today, November 10th, you'll turn this sermon in and then work through Genesis chapter 11 is what we'll cover. And then Lord willing, and hopefully questions then too, even more time than today. I'll have about 5 minutes for questions today. And then if there's any questions, more questions next time. So jot some notes down as you're studying. And then on the 17th, 3 weeks from today is your final exam. Okay, do you have any questions as we conclude the class? I can go about 5 minutes over. I know we're gonna, what time we have? We're right about quitting time now. As I'm leaving the homework up here, anyone have any questions I can answer for you, or if you can hold it over to next time. I think we'll have 2 hours, and then we'll have time to answer questions then as well. Any questions today? Any pressing questions today need to be answered? Mute your mic and let me know, please. Or we can wait till next time. This, by the way, is a very important sermon because these are areas that are under attack today. Not just in our world and our culture, these are areas under attack in churches today. Creation of humans that were created in God's image, which is part of the argument behind the point why the Bible teaches capital punishment if a human murders another human. And also that God created humans with only 2 genders, 2 sexes, male and female. These are things under attack. All 3 of these are under attack in our world today. And like I said, even in churches today, not in our Bible preaching churches, but in churches in general. People do not understand. People who call themselves Christians do not understand. They believe in evolution. They believe that human life is not any more special than the animal life. Now, that's a problem in India, remember? People worship the animals there sometimes. Well, God created humans in his image, not oxen, not sheep, but humans. And then God only created 2 sexes, male and female. But yeah, in our culture today, and I'm not sure how big this is in India, but in America, this is a big, crazy movement right now. All the different genders and aspects. So this is a very important sermon. Put your time into that. And it might even develop in the future into 3 sermons, but begin with 1 sermon today. Any questions?
Yeah, sir. How many pages we have to write?
Sorry?
How many pages we have to write? We need to write it.
How many
Topics.
pages?
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't put that in there. Usually I would say 1 to 2 pages. It's what, 1 or 2 pages. It can go much more than that. Probably a good average would be 2 pages. 1 page might be too short, but 2 pages. Now, I'm talking about the outline you turn in. You may have much more behind that. I mean, I could probably write 10 pages on these topics. But you want to be able to prepare it so you'll be able to preach it. So it's going to be the skeleton outline of that, but it's a sermon you're going to preach. And we've given you a lot of leeway, a lot of leeway there. But thank you for saying that. I didn't put that there. Probably 1 to 2 pages. I would say probably that'd be a minimum.
Okay, thank you. And we go. Our 3 topics we have to write, right? So, all the 3 topics, 1, 2, 3.
All three should be involved in your message. All 3.
Not separate.
They kind of build on each other.
Involved.
I was talking. What'd you say?
Yeah, not separately. It's involved. Connect each other. That 1, 2, 3 up to 1, 2, 3. Have put the 1, 2, 3 topics here. Point. God created humans. God created human in His image. God created human, male and female. That's connect each other or different topics we have to write.
No, that is a topic. That is what needs to be on. All 3 should be covered in your sermon. You could actually make that point 1, point 2, point 3 of your sermon.
That will be 1 topic, right? Then
yeah.
It's a point only. That's the point 1, 2, 3 is the point sub point only. Then a topic will be different, and there will be 1 sermon, right? Then it's not sermon. 3 sermon.
That's
only
correct.
1 sermon.
Just one sermon. Just 1 sermon for me for this class. But in the future, you could probably easily develop this into 3 different sermons. But for this class, just make it 1 sermon. You don't have to develop the whole thing now. Just 1 sermon. But covering all 3 of these areas. They obviously overlap. Humans, made in God's image, male and female. They all overlap. Like I said, you can develop into 3 sermons in the future. But for this class, 1 sermon is all we're looking for. Good questions.
Thank you.
Anything else? Or anything over the first 10 chapters? All right, men. Thank you for your time, your attention again. Put your energy into this sermon. It's a very important sermon that you will probably preach time and time again because these are current issues in our world, in our culture, and even in our churches. So put your time into it. Minimum of 1 to 2 pages. It could be more pages, but prepare in such a way so you can preach it to your people. Let's have a word of prayer when we're dismissed, okay? Father, thank you for your word and the truths of your word. Bless these men as they dig into your word and preparing this last sermon. And as we are wrapping up this class, may you bless them and use them. We thank you for all this in Jesus Christ's name. Amen. God bless you, men. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
So let us relax. Leaders.
Recording.
Recording, sir.
Recording.